I was standing at my kitchen counter that afternoon, stirring a pot of soup I barely had the appetite to finish, when the doorbell began pounding. Not ringing, pounding, like someone wanted to break the door down. My hands trembled before I even reached the handle. At my age, you learn to sense when danger is on the other side. When I opened the door, there she was. My son's wife. Freshly married. Cold eyes, expensive perfume. A smile sharpened like a blade. And beside her stood a man in a dark gray suit, clutching a leather briefcase. "Mrs. Albright," he said, pushing his glasses up. "We're here regarding your assets." Before I could even speak, they walked past me, into my home, into the living room where my husband's portrait still hung. The lawyer set a stack of papers on the table with a thud that echoed through the house. "You have been withholding financial information," he announced. "We are prepared to proceed with immediate legal action, unless you comply." My daughter-in-law crossed her arms, her voice dripping with poison. "We know what you're hiding. And we know you moved money before the wedding." My chest tightened. My breath caught. Because she was right. I had hidden something. My entire fortune. Every last cent my late husband left me. Moved far away from hands I couldn't trust. But I never thought the first person to accuse me would be the woman who married my son just weeks ago. And worse, standing behind her, silent, ashamed, yet complicit, was my son. My only child. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He just stood there while they threatened to tear my life apart. And in that moment, a truth colder than winter settled in my bones. I realized then my son wasn't here to protect me. He was here to destroy me. Before I tell you how everything collapsed, please subscribe so you don't miss stories like mine. Stories that remind us how fragile trust can be. People often say that life changes slowly, like a sunset fading into night. But mine changed in a single week. The week I buried my husband. I remember standing beside his coffin, my fingers brushing the polished wood as if I could warm it with one last touch. 43 years of marriage, gone in a heartbeat. The church was filled with murmurs, footsteps, and polite condolences, but all I heard was the hollow silence inside my chest. My husband, Walter, was the kind of man who could make an entire room feel safe. Even in his final weeks, when the illness had thinned his body, his eyes never lost their gentleness. Losing him felt like losing the last solid piece of my world. But the true shock came not from his death, but from what he left behind. After the funeral, Walter's longtime attorney, Mr. Brooks, a quiet man with silver hair and soft, steady eyes, came to my house with a sealed envelope. "He insisted I give this to you personally," he said, placing the envelope into my shaking hands. "He wanted you to understand everything clearly." Inside was a letter written in Walter's familiar, strong handwriting. I didn't make it through the first 2 lines before the tears blurred the page. "Margaret, my love. If you're reading this, then I'm no longer beside you. I entrust you with everything I built. Our home, our businesses, our investments. Please be careful. Not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions. Protect our fortune until you're certain who can be trusted." I gripped the paper like it was the last thread connecting me to him. When I turned the page, I saw the figures, the total value of his estate. Millions. Much more than I had ever realized. Properties, land he bought quietly over decades. Investments he nurtured like seedlings. All of it now mine. But one detail stood out like a warning bell. A clause written specifically about our son Daniel. Walter wrote that if Daniel rushed into marriage with someone who seemed driven by financial gain, the fortune was to remain under my control until Daniel matured, regardless of his age. It wasn't a message of distrust. It was a plea for wisdom. I folded the letter gently and locked it in the top drawer of Walter's desk. That same evening, I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the quiet warmth of memories. And for the first time since his passing, I felt something other than grief. I felt fear. Because at the funeral, tucked among the mourners wearing black and carrying solemn faces, I had noticed her. Daniel's new girlfriend, Emily. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect timing. She didn't cry. She didn't grieve. She didn't even look at Walter's coffin. She watched people. She watched me. Her eyes moved over the house, the furniture, the portraits on the walls, calculating, assessing. almost as if she were silently taking inventory. A chill crawled down my spine that day, and as Walter's warning echoed in my mind, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If someone ever tried to take what he left me, what he trusted me to guard, I would have no choice but to hide it, to protect it, to protect us. The first time Daniel officially introduced Emily to me, I truly tried, to keep an open heart. After losing Walter, I wanted to believe in new beginnings, in the possibility that my son had found someone to love him the way his father loved me. But from the moment she stepped into my home, something felt off. She walked through the doorway with a bright smile, but her eyes moved with a kind of hunger. They didn't rest on me, not at first, but drifted across the house. Over the chandelier Walter installed himself. Over the antique piano he restored by hand. Over the framed deeds on the wall of the land he purchased decades ago. She wasn't admiring. She was calculating. "Your home is impressive," she said, her fingers grazing the mahogany railing of the staircase like she was testing its quality. Daniel never told me his parents were so comfortable. The word comfortable came wrapped in silk, but underneath I could hear the metal scraping. She didn't ask about me. She didn't ask about my health, or how I was coping with Walter's passing. Instead she asked, "How many bedrooms does this place have? How long have you lived here? Is the land behind the house all yours? Do you maintain the property alone?" And every question ended with that same subtle, eager glint. She noticed my wedding ring and asked, far too casually, "Is that real diamond? It must be worth a fortune." Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Emily, don't be weird." But she wasn't being weird. She was being strategic. Later that evening, when I brought dessert to the table, she excused herself to the restroom. Except she didn't go to the restroom. I heard footsteps upstairs, light ones, the kind a person makes when they're trying not to be heard. When she returned, her hair was perfectly in place, her smile unchanged, but her eyes flicked, just once, toward Walter's study. My heart sank. I wanted to tell Daniel. I wanted to warn him. But every time I opened my mouth, Emily slid her hand around his arm, leaned her head onto his shoulder, and looked up at him with that sweet, painted innocence. She played the part of the perfect woman so well that even I questioned my instincts. But then, as she and Daniel were leaving, she paused at the doorway. She turned back to me, her expression soft and polite, but her eyes sharp enough to cut through bone. "You have a beautiful life here," she said. "It must be a lot to manage alone. Maybe one day Daniel and I can help take care of things." It wasn't an offer. It was a warning. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet house, Walter's letter burned in my memory. His words weren't a caution anymore, they were a prophecy. Emily was not here for love. She was here for the life I built. After Emily's first visit, I barely slept. I tossed beneath the weight of Walter's warning, that folded letter locked in his desk drawer like a pulse waiting to be felt. Something inside me whispered that if I didn't act soon, everything he left behind, everything he trusted me to guard, would slip into the wrong hands. A week later, I finally sat down with Mr. Brooks again. He laid out the full copy of Walter's will and trust documents across his office desk. The room smelled of old leather and polished wood, a comforting scent that reminded me of Walter's study. "I want to understand every detail," I told him. He nodded and walked me through the clauses. Most were straightforward, but one section made the air feel heavier around us. A protective clause triggered by rushed or suspicious marriages involving our son. Walter had always been a good judge of character. Even years ago, he worried about opportunistic relationships, people drawn not to our family but to what our family had. "This clause puts the full control of the estate solely in your hands," Mr. Brooks explained. "No spouse, no partner. No in-law can access any part of the fortune unless you personally approve it." I swallowed hard. "And if I don't approve? Then everything remains locked. Untouchable." I exhaled, relief and fear tangling in my chest. But the most personal part wasn't the legal writing. It was the handwritten note attached to the document. A second message from Walter, more intimate than the first. "Margaret, if Daniel ever falls under the influence of someone who seeks wealth instead of love, protect him, even if he resents you for it. I trust your judgment more than he trusts his own. Keep what we built safe until he can stand on his own." My hands shook as I traced his handwriting. His words weren't just a warning, they were a plea, a final act of love, asking me to shield our family's future even at the cost of my own peace. I realized then that Emily didn't need to know about the will. She didn't need to know about the investments, the land, the accounts, or the properties Walter quietly accumulated over decades. She didn't need to know anything at all. So I made the decision. I worked with Mr. Brooks to move the entire fortune, every dollar, every deed, every asset, into protected trusts and coded accounts. Quietly, legally, completely out of reach. I hid everything. Not out of greed, not out of paranoia, but because I could feel the storm coming. And Emily? She was just getting started. Emily didn't waste time. Barely a month after her first visit, after the night I caught her quietly wandering upstairs, Daniel came by with an announcement that nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. We were sitting in the living room, the late afternoon sun spilling through the curtains, when he cleared his throat in that nervous, boyish way he used to when he was hiding bad grades. "Mom, Emily and I are getting married." My heart sank so sharply I could almost hear it hit the floor. "So soon?" I asked softly. "You've only known each other a few months." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "When you know, you know. And Emily feels like home." Home. The word stung. Walter used to say that I was his home. And for Daniel to give that precious word to a woman he barely knew, it felt wrong. Forced. Rehearsed. Before I could say another word, Emily appeared from the hallway, uninvited of course, and wrapped her arms around Daniel's waist like a ribbon tying him to her. "We don't want a long engagement," she said, her smile polished and perfect. "Life is short, and weddings are really about love, not planning." But she didn't look at Daniel when she said it. She looked at me, as if daring me to challenge her. Over the next week, her questions became sharper, less casual, more targeted. She asked about the property boundaries, about Walter's old business partners, even about the farmland my husband bought years ago. "Did he leave plans for it?" she asked once, pretending to admire the family photos. "Or something in writing? It must be worth a fortune today." Every sentence was dipped in honey, but the intention underneath was unmistakable. Daniel, blinded by affection or infatuation, or manipulation, couldn't see any of it. He told me they wanted a small ceremony. He told me he wanted it soon. He told me Emily didn't believe in dragging things out. But the truth became clearer with every passing day. Emily needed that ring on her finger quickly, before anyone could stop her, before Daniel could think clearly, before I could act. One evening, while I was serving them dinner, she slipped in a question so casually I almost missed the venom behind it. "Daniel mentioned you're managing things alone since Walter passed. That must be overwhelming. Have you started arranging how the estate will be handled when you're older?" Daniel choked on his water. I froze. She smiled sweetly, pretending innocence. "I only meant, it would be good to have clarity before the wedding, so Daniel knows what responsibilities he's stepping into." Responsibilities. Not love. Not partnership. Responsibilities. That night, after they left, I sat at the kitchen table in the silence Walter once filled. I touched the edge of his letter, still folded neatly inside my robe pocket. The storm wasn't coming. It was here. And I knew, without a doubt, that Emily wasn't marrying my son. She was marrying my life. Everything I had built with Walter. Everything he entrusted to me. She planned to claim as hers. But I said nothing. I remained calm. Silent. Still. Because snakes reveal their intentions faster when you don't interrupt their slither. It happened on a Tuesday morning. One of those quiet days where nothing feels threatening, where the air smells of fresh coffee and sunlight warms the curtains. I was folding laundry when the knock came. Except it wasn't a knock. It was a demand. 3 heavy thuds. Then another. As if someone intended to break the door down if I didn't open fast enough. When I pulled the door open, Emily wasn't alone. She stood at my doorstep wearing a blazer far too formal for a casual visit. Her posture was stiff, impatient, triumphant. Beside her stood a man in a charcoal suit, expressionless, holding a briefcase with the kind of self-importance only lawyers and villains carry. "Good morning, Mrs. Albright," he said, stepping forward without waiting for permission. "We have some matters to discuss." Before I could even invite them in or shut the door, they walked past me. Emily brushed my shoulder as she entered, a silent message. "I'm in control now." They sat down in my living room as if they owned the place. My living room. The one Walter and I built from scratch with our bare hands. The lawyer placed a stack of papers on the coffee table, thick, stapled, crisp, and pushed them toward me. "These documents pertain to the financial obligations and property disclosures required in preparation for Daniel and Emily's marriage," he said. "Your cooperation is expected." I blinked at him. "I'm sorry, required by whom?" He adjusted his glasses. "By law, spouses and their families are entitled to certain information. Mrs. Albright, transparency at this stage is critical." Emily crossed her legs slowly, arms folded, eyes sharpened into needles. "We just want to make sure Daniel understands what he's marrying into," she said. "It's standard." Standard. As if invading my home, my privacy, my life, was standard. I lifted the stack of papers. Property maps. Asset declarations. Full financial disclosures. Requests for bank statements. Requests for estate information. Requests for Walter's investments. My throat tightened. "What is this?" I whispered. The lawyer leaned forward. "It would be in your best interest to comply. If not, we can pursue a formal inquiry. Subpoenas. Financial audits. Whatever is necessary." Emily's voice cut through the room, cold and deliberate. "You've been acting secretive. And Daniel has a right to know exactly what his family owns." Secretive. The word hit like a slap. I looked at her perfectly painted face, at the confidence she wore like armor. She didn't even pretend anymore. She wanted what I had, and she wanted it fast. "What does Daniel say about all this?" I asked quietly. As if on cue, footsteps echoed from the hallway. My son, my boy, walked in. He must have been waiting outside, listening, unsure whether he should come in at all. He looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Helpless. And worst of all, conflicted. "Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. "This is just easier. Emily's right. We should all be on the same page before the wedding." I felt something inside me crack. He wasn't protecting me. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't questioning her motives. He was standing behind her. With her. Against me. "Daniel," I whispered. "Why would you bring a lawyer into my home?" He swallowed. "We didn't want things to get complicated." Emily placed a hand on his arm, guiding him like a puppet. "It's nothing personal," she added with a saccharine smile. "But we need clarity." Clarity. From the woman who had been quietly assessing every corner of my life. From the woman who planned a rushed marriage. From the woman whose eyes gleamed every time she saw something worth money. The room felt suddenly cold. Too cold for daylight. My voice trembled when I spoke. "You're threatening legal action against me?" The lawyer nodded. "If necessary." Emily's smile widened. And in that moment, surrounded by betrayal in my own living room, I realized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was an ambush. The woman my son loved had just drawn the first blade. And he let her. After Emily and that lawyer walked out of my home, leaving papers scattered across my coffee table like shards of my dignity, I sat frozen in my chair long after the door closed. The house felt different. Violated. As if their presence had tainted the air. I kept seeing Daniel's face. The way he wouldn't look at me. The hesitation. The shame. The confusion. The blind loyalty. I could have broken apart right then. But grief can harden into something stronger when you're pushed far enough. And I had been pushed. The next morning I called Mr. Brooks. By the time he arrived, I had the papers neatly stacked and a determination burning in my chest that I hadn't felt since Walter's final days. "Margaret," he said carefully after reviewing the documents, "they're fishing. They don't have evidence. They're hoping you'll panic and give them something they can use." I exhaled slowly, anger finally replacing shock. "So we find out what they have," I said. "I want the truth." He nodded. That was the beginning. Mr. Brooks requested a review of my old phone statements, something I hadn't expected would matter. But buried between calls from family and doctor appointments were unfamiliar numbers. 3 in particular. All placed late at night. All connected to financial offices I had never contacted. The dates matched the weeks after Emily first visited the house. Did you authorize anyone to inquire about your old accounts? Mr. Brooks asked. No, I said firmly. He tightened his jaw. Then someone has been trying to dig. And there was only one person who had shown that much interest. A few days later, I went to the county recorder's office with Mr. Brooks. The clerk pulled up search logs. And there it was. Emily's full name. Multiple times. Searching. Property deeds. Inherited land. Mortgage history. Business filings in my husband's name. My stomach turned. She's preparing for something, Mr. Brooks said. She's making a profile of your assets. A profile. Like I was a target to be analyzed. I never imagined I would hire a private investigator. At my age, I believed in prayer, faith, and conversation, not surveillance. But faith couldn't protect me from a woman like Emily. Mr. Brooks recommended a man named Carter. A quiet, observant investigator with a knack for revealing inconvenient truths. I expected the process to take weeks. Took 4 days. And what he uncovered shattered the last pieces of doubt I had left. Emily had dated 2 older men in her past, both with money. Been involved in a workplace dispute over misuse of confidential files. Broken off a previous engagement shortly after learning the fiancé's family had no inheritance. Maintained a hidden social media account portraying a very different, much colder lifestyle. But the worst discovery wasn't about her past. It was about Daniel. Carter found copies of online chats. Emily messaging a friend, bragging that Daniel was easy to mold, and that she was finally marrying into something worthwhile. Worthwhile. That's how she saw my son. Not as a partner. As a stepping stone. And beneath that chat, one message chilled my blood. Once the marriage is final, I'll have access. His mother won't stand in the way. I sat there, staring at the printed messages until the letters blurred. My son. My only son being manipulated, controlled, used like a pawn. Walter's warning echoed in my mind with painful clarity. Protect him, even if he resents you for it. Now I understood why he wrote it. Emily wasn't just after wealth. She was after control. Of my fortune. Of my son. Of everything Walter and I built. And she had already made the first move. But she had underestimated one thing. I wasn't the fragile widow she thought I was. I was a mother. And mothers protect their own. Even when their children can't see the danger. And I was done being quiet. The days following the investigation felt strangely quiet. Too quiet, like the air before a storm. I tried to move through my routines, but something always felt out of place. Conversations with neighbors ended abruptly when I walked by. Church friends exchanged glances instead of smiles. Even the cashier at the market, who'd known me for 20 years, avoided eye contact. At first, I thought grief had made me paranoid. But then the whispers began reaching my ears. Her husband left her nothing. That's why she's acting desperate. She's trying to hold on to what little she has left. She's being stubborn about sharing the estate. Poor Daniel. My niece said the fiancé is terrified the mother is hiding assets. Hiding assets. Desperate. Stubborn. Greedy. It was like hearing someone describe a stranger wearing my face. One Sunday at church, the full weight of the rumors crashed onto me. I walked into the fellowship hall after service, carrying a plate of cookies I had baked the night before. But as I approached the group I usually sat with, women I prayed with, cried with after Walter's death, they fell silent. Their smiles were tight, forced. Then one of them, a woman named Ruth, leaned toward me and whispered, "Margaret, is it true? Are you refusing to help Daniel and his new wife financially? People are saying you want to control them." Control them? The woman trying to take everything from me was being painted as the victim. I felt the blood drain from my face. Emily had done this. She had woven her poisonous narrative through the community with the grace of a seasoned liar. After service, as I stepped outside, I saw her, Emily, standing beside Daniel, comforting a woman who was patting her shoulder sympathetically. When she noticed me, she dabbed her eyes and said loudly enough for several people to hear, "I just want harmony, but his mother keeps pushing me away." The crowd murmured. Daniel looked torn, but he didn't defend me. Not once. I left the church early, walking home alone, my vision blurring. The humiliation pressed on me like a physical weight. I had spent my whole life building a reputation of kindness and integrity. Now, with a few well-placed lies, Emily was tearing it apart. That evening, exhausted from crying, I opened Walter's letter again. The one he wrote just for me. The paper was worn from how many times I had unfolded it, but his handwriting was still strong. If the world turns against you for doing the right thing, stand firm. People will see the truth in time. I wiped my tears and closed my eyes. The humiliation, the whispers, the shame, they weren't signs of defeat. They were signs that Emily felt threatened. And people only attack loudly when they fear what you still have the power to do. She had dragged my name through the mud, but she had no idea what I was preparing next. Humiliation has a strange way of sharpening the mind. The whispers, the pitying looks, the lies Emily planted, they didn't crush me. They clarified everything. If she was willing to smear my name in public, then she was preparing for something much bigger behind closed doors. And I needed to be ready. The first thing I did was take back control of my home. Every corner she had wandered, every drawer she had peeked into, every surface she had touched while pretending to admire the decor. I wasn't letting her use my own house against me again. I bought a small digital recorder, something discreet. My hands shook a little as I unboxed it. I never imagined I'd live to see the day I recorded conversations in my own living room. But necessity carves paths we never expect to walk. I placed it behind a vase in the entryway, another under the living room shelf, one near the kitchen doorway. If Emily wanted to trap me with lies, then I would let her speak freely, capturing every word she never thought would be heard again. A few days later, she came by unannounced again. I offered her tea with the calmness of a grandmother hosting a polite afternoon visit. Inside, I was steel. "I hope you and Daniel aren't worried about the estate," I said lightly. "Everything is already arranged." Her eyes flickered, curiosity and alarm blending in a flash. "Arranged how?" she asked, trying to hide her urgency. "Oh, just in ways that protect the family," I said. She leaned forward, voice sharpening. "Does Daniel have access?" "Because he should. After the wedding, everything should naturally shift to shared responsibility." There it was. The truth she always avoided saying directly. "You sound very certain about that," I said. She smiled thinly. "I like security." And the recorder captured all of it. That evening, I met with Mr. Brooks. I handed him the audio files and the printed messages the investigator uncovered. He listened quietly, his expression growing darker with every minute. "Margaret," he said finally, "we can build a solid defense. And more importantly, we can expose her." We updated the trust protections. We prepared emergency motions. We drafted statements in case she attempted legal intimidation again. Every document was reviewed, notarized, and sealed. For the first time since the chaos began, I felt protected. The next week, Daniel came alone. No lawyer. No Emily. He looked tired, like a man stretching himself between two worlds. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, though my heart ached at how much older he looked. He sat across from me, wringing his hands. "Emily says you're hiding things. She says you don't trust her. And honestly, it feels like you're pushing us away." The words cut deep, but I didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, I felt Walter's presence steadying me. "Daniel," I said gently. "Trust is earned, not demanded." He looked conflicted. "Lost. If you ever need the truth," I added softly, "I'll show you everything. But only when you come to me. Not when someone drags you here." He didn't know what to say. He stood, hugged me briefly, and left. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly. Emily was tightening her grip on him. But now I had evidence. I had legal protection. I had recordings. And most importantly, I finally had the strength to fight back. The battle hadn't begun yet, but I was ready when it did. The confrontation didn't come quietly. It erupted, loud, sharp, and inevitable. Like a storm that had been building for months. It began with a letter from Emily's lawyer. A formal request for full financial disclosure. A threat of court intervention if I did not comply. Mr. Brooks reviewed the letter calmly, then looked at me with steady eyes. "It's time," he said. "We won't run. We'll confront this head-on." And so we did. The courthouse felt colder than I expected. Marble floors, echoing footsteps, the smell of paper and steel. A place designed to strip emotion from truth. Emily arrived in a fitted black suit, confident as ever. Her lawyer walked beside her with a stack of documents tall enough to topple. Daniel followed a few steps behind, shoulders tense, eyes clouded with dread. When he saw me, his expression softened for a moment, then hardened again, as though Emily's presence snapped him back into place. I wanted to reach out to him, but this wasn't a place for tenderness. This was a battlefield. We entered the chamber. The judge, stern, sharp-eyed, took her seat. Everyone rose. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything Walter had entrusted me with. The judge began. Mrs. Emily Carter and Mr. Daniel Albright versus Mrs. Margaret Albright. Matter: alleged concealment of marital assets and unjust withholding of family estate. I breathed slowly. Let them speak first. Let them reveal themselves. Emily's lawyer stood confidently. "Your Honor, my client believes Mrs. Albright has been deliberately hiding assets in anticipation of her son's marriage. We are prepared to provide evidence of suspicious financial behavior." He gestured dramatically at the stack of papers. Emily put on her best wounded expression. "All we want," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed, "is transparency. A chance to build our marriage with honesty." She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I almost admired the performance. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Albright, do you have representation?" Mr. Brooks stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Proceed." Mr. Brooks's voice was calm, deliberate, and sharp enough to cut through the courtroom haze. "Your Honor, my client has no obligation to disclose her personal assets to her adult son or his fiancée. Furthermore, we assert that the plaintiffs are not seeking transparency, but access." He placed a single folder on the table. Inside this are records of repeated attempts by Ms. Emily Carter to obtain private financial information. Unauthorized calls, property searches, and inquiries into protected accounts. The judge's eyebrows lifted. Emily shifted in her seat. Mr. Brooks continued. "We also have search logs from the county recorder showing Ms. Carter repeatedly accessing Mrs. Albright's property records." The room stirred. The judge leaned forward. "Miss Carter, is this true?" Emily swallowed. I was only trying to understand Daniel's family obligations. We're getting married after all." A vague, fluttery answer. The judge was not impressed. Then Mr. Brooks delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, we also have audio recordings and written correspondence demonstrating Ms. Carter's intent to secure financial gain through this marriage." He clicked a button. Emily's voice played over the speakers, cold, calculating, unmistakable. "Once the marriage is final, I'll have access. His mother won't stand in the way." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's face drained of color. He stared at Emily as if seeing her for the first time. "No," Emily whispered, shaking her head. "That's taken out of context." "There's more," Mr. Brooks said. Another recording played. "She's old. She won't be around forever. Once the estate passes on, Daniel and I will be set. We just need to make sure she signs what she needs to sign." The judge's expression turned from skepticism to disgust. Emily's lawyer slowly lowered his head. "Miss Carter," the judge said coldly, "you made these statements?" Emily shook her head wildly. "No, that's not." "Daniel, you know me. You know I wouldn't." But Daniel didn't look at her. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with betrayal, not toward me but toward the woman he thought he loved. "Emily," he whispered, voice cracking. "Did you ever love me?" She froze. His voice rose, trembling. Was I just your ticket? Is that all I was? Emily reached for his hand. Baby, no, listen, they're twisting. He pulled away as though her touch burned him. The judge tapped her gavel. Enough. The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the documents and recordings one last time. Finally, she spoke. Given the overwhelming evidence of manipulative intent, unauthorized searches, and financial targeting, this court finds no grounds to compel Mrs. Margaret Albright to disclose her assets. She turned a steely gaze toward Emily. Furthermore, Miss Carter, your conduct raises serious concerns. You have attempted to exploit this family for personal gain. Any further legal action you attempt will be subject to immediate scrutiny. Emily's face crumpled. Her lawyer sighed. Daniel covered his face with his hands, shaking. I didn't smile. There was no victory in this. Only relief. And heartbreak. As we exited the courtroom, Emily chased after Daniel, grabbing his arm. Daniel, please listen to me. They're lying. But he gently removed her hand, tears streaming down his face. I don't know who you are, he whispered. She sank into a bench, sobbing, not from heartbreak, but from losing the battle she thought she had already won. I watched quietly, Walter's words echoing in my mind. Protect him, even if he resents you. Today he didn't resent me. Today he saw the truth. And today the storm finally broke. When we stepped out of the courthouse, the air felt warmer, as if the sky itself had been holding its breath through the hearing. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, while Daniel followed a few steps behind. He didn't speak, not at first. He looked hollow, stunned, like a man waking from a long, cruel dream. Mom, he finally whispered. I turned. He stood there with his face crumpling, the brave facade dissolving from him like paint in the rain. And before I could take another breath, he broke. I'm so sorry, he cried, covering his eyes with trembling hands. I didn't know. I didn't see it. I should have listened. I should have protected you. A mother's heart is built for forgiveness. Even bruised, it softens at the sound of her child's pain. I wrapped my arms around him, my own tears falling into his hair. She fooled you, I said gently. She fooled all of us. And love makes good people blind. Walter always said that. He shook his head, shoulders trembling. I thought she loved me. I know, I whispered. And that's what makes your heart good. We stood there in that moment. Two wounded people beginning to mend. The fallout came fast. Within a week, Emily's online profiles were flooded with comments after the recordings leaked during legal filings. Her own friends distanced themselves. Clients from her workplace reported concerns about her integrity. She was put on unpaid leave, then suspended, then quietly dismissed. Daniel didn't go back to her. Not for closure. Not for apology. Not for anything. He blocked her number. He returned what few belongings she had left at his apartment. He refused to hear her explanations when she showed up at his workplace begging for forgiveness. The truth had finally found its way to him. Raw, unfiltered, undeniable. For a time, Daniel moved back into my home. Not because he needed money, but because he needed space to understand how deeply he had been manipulated. He apologized every night. Every morning. Sometimes in the middle of meals. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said once. You deserve to grow, I replied. And growth is painful. Slowly, he began rebuilding his life, taking therapy sessions, volunteering at a local community center, studying finances with Mr. Brooks to understand the responsibilities he once took for granted. And through it all, the walls between us, the ones Emily built brick by brick, began to crumble. We talked again, laughed again, sat together without tension again. For the first time since Walter's passing, our home felt like a home. In the months that followed, the dust finally began to settle. The chaos Emily brought into our lives had burned itself out, leaving behind something unexpected, quiet. A silence that wasn't empty, but healing. A silence that allowed me to breathe again. One morning, as I sat on the porch wrapped in the shawl Walter bought me years ago, I realized something profound. I had spent so many months fighting to protect the past. The fortune Walter built. the home we created, the legacy we nurtured. But now, I was being called to protect the future. I couldn't let the story end with bitterness. Not after everything we survived. And so, I made a decision. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Brooks in his quiet, book-lined office. When he closed the door behind us, I felt Walter's presence again, steady, warm, urging me forward. "Mr. Brooks," I said, "I want to use part of the fortune for something good. Something that will outlive all this ugliness." He smiled softly. "What do you have in mind?" I looked out his window at the small town that had been home for so many years. A town full of widows who grieved quietly, alone. A town full of older women who lost control of their lives the moment their husbands passed, simply because no one taught them how to manage money, property, or legal matters. A town full of people like I had once been. "I want to create a foundation," I said. "A center for widows. A place where they can learn to manage finances, understand wills, protect themselves legally, and rebuild their independence." Mr. Brooks's expression softened with admiration. "That," he said, "would have made Walter very proud." We spent the next several weeks drafting plans. The foundation would offer free legal workshops, financial literacy classes, counseling and emotional support, estate planning guidance, and a safe community where women could share and heal. I named it the Albright Center for Resilience, after my husband. It felt right, like tying a ribbon around the last chapter of our life together and sending it into the future. Meanwhile, Daniel was changing too. He stopped searching for love in the wrong places. He stopped relying on charm and chance. He started building something real with his own two hands. He took classes on financial responsibility, sometimes staying up late at the dining table, surrounded by notes and lectures. Sometimes he'd pause, look at me, and say quietly, "I'm sorry, Mom," before going back to studying. He volunteered on weekends at the center once it opened, helping arrange chairs, carrying supplies, even speaking to younger men about recognizing manipulative relationships. He was becoming the man Walter hoped he'd be, not because of inheritance, not because of wealth, but because he finally understood the value of integrity. One evening, as we locked up the center after a busy workshop, he turned to me. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't want the fortune yet. Not until I'm ready. Not until I've earned your trust back completely." I reached for his hand. "Daniel," I whispered, "trust isn't earned in perfection. It's earned in growth. And your father would be so proud of who you're becoming." For the first time in months, he smiled, truly smiled. I wasn't the same woman I had been before the storm. I was stronger, wiser, less afraid. The fortune Walter left was no longer a burden I had to defend. It had become a tool to lift others up. Our home was no longer a battleground, it was a sanctuary again. And I was no longer just an old widow holding on to memories. I was a woman forging a legacy. Emily had tried to take everything from me, but in surviving her, I found something she could never steal. A future built not on fear, but on resilience. And that, dear listener, is how I survived the darkest chapter of my life. A chapter filled with betrayal, manipulation, and the painful realization that even those we love can be led astray. But I also learned something far greater. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it waits patiently until the moment it's needed. Walter's warning saved me. My own courage carried me. And Daniel's growth healed me. If there is anything I hope you take from my story, it's this. Protect what matters. Stand your ground. And never apologize for defending your peace, even when others try to shame you for it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoy powerful, emotional stories like this one, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more people who might need them. Until next time, take care and stay strong.